I think, that his employees thought enough to go out and purchase a car like that for him. And it's just a real special car.
In addition, one employee signed over his personalized license tag to Mr. Davis, making sure that the car, specially painted in the company shade of blue, was identified as Piedmont. This magnanimous spirit continued to permeate the company even as the Speedbird expanded rapidly. The Piedmont family welcomed numerous pilots from Braniff Airlines, a casualty of deregulation, to help fly the growing fleet of pacemakers.
I came from a good airline. Braniff was a good airline. I thought one of the best. Piedmont, if anything, was better.
I know I had one of the Braniff guys tell me one time, said, it's amazing how the difference that y'all have treated us. So when we came over here, y'all treated us like family. But if it would have been reversed and Piedmont would have went under and you guys would have came over to Braniff, you wouldn't have been treated that good.
Expansion was, by most industry observations, stupendous. In addition to hubs and new destinations, Piedmont grew by purchasing existing companies like Henson Airlines, a Maryland commuter, Jetstream International in Pennsylvania, Empire Airlines, a regional carrier based in Syracuse, New York, and started an intra-Florida service that flew over 100 flights to 12 cities in the Sunshine State every day. As part of branding its identity as a Southern airline, Piedmont sponsored a NASCAR team that won the Winston Cup title. With everything going right, it seemed inevitable that the airline industry would recognize the company's success. The honor came in 1984.
In that year alone, they've topped for the first time a revenue of over $1 billion. They ended up the year with almost like $1.3 billion in revenue. Their passenger count went up 21% in 1 year, and yet they remained very profitable, and they also finished the year with the fewest complaints from passengers. Their customer service was holding up despite all this growth, which is a very tricky thing to do. In recognition of that, the industry awarded them a very prestigious designation as Airline of the Year in 1984.
That was a time everybody was so proud of the company that we got Airline of the Year. But that instilled an awful lot of pride in the company with the people. They could tell themselves, I was part of making this happen.
Much of the expansion was made possible by investment in Piedmont Aviation. One key contributor was Norfolk Southern Railroad, who in 1982 claimed a minority stake of 20% ownership in the company for 5 years. The investment allowed Bill Howard and his team full discretion to grow the airline, providing capital to secure more equipment and personnel. A new headquarters in Winston-Salem was built, as well as state-of-the-art maintenance facilities. Piedmont soon advertised itself as the up-and-coming airline, hiring former MASH star McLean Stevenson as its spokesman in numerous commercials.
It all started when my wife said, honey, Piedmont's fares are so low. Why don't you take me along on your next fishing trip?
I'd like to tell you about some of the great fares you can get from here on Piedmont Airlines. Piedmont starts offering these incredibly low fares, and the next thing you know, they need extra help in reservations.
But with Piedmont's low winter fares, I figure I've already saved a bundle. That's it. No more fishing commercials.
Piedmont Airlines was flying high. By the end of the 5-year agreement with the railroad, it looked as though Norfolk Southern would buy the airline outright. Expectations ran high, and so did Piedmont stock. Unfortunately, in early 1987, just as everyone expected Piedmont to be acquired by the railroad, other bidders entered the picture. U.S. Air, formerly Allegheny Airlines, began buying more stock than Norfolk Southern. TWA also showed interest. After driving up the price to almost $70 a share, the railroad cashed out, leaving the company ripe for takeover. When the bidding frenzy ended, another airline controlled Piedmont's destiny.
U.S. Air was feeling threatened by the prospect of Piedmont Airlines having access to all that money from Norfolk Southern and being able to buy up TWA and who knows, maybe them. So as a defensive move, they decided to get in a bidding war for Piedmont.
As the deal became final, Piedmont continued to fly under its own colors, but it was obvious things were not the same. Bill Howard left the company, as did a number of the management team. Many who could retire did. U.S. Air implemented a mirror image program to run both airlines in the same way, but morale worsened under new work rules that Piedmont people saw as inefficient, even when their pay scale improved. Employees of the two airlines, now one, regarded each other with suspicion.
I remember one time I was in Tampa on a turnaround, and a U.S. Air crew came in, and I was standing there, He said, I didn't know you Piedmont boys wore shoes. I just bought a brand new pair of shoes and had them on. I said, yep, this is the first pair I ever had. I said, you know all them years you've been buying shoes? I said, I was buying Piedmont stock. I got $70 a share from the stock. How you doing your shoes? He just turned around and left.
It was obvious from the first meeting that the culture between the two airlines were entirely different. Even though both airlines had started out in the late 1940s, they were both regional carriers, they flew comparable equipment. The difference in the culture, the way they approached things, was day and night.
The merger with U.S. Air came the same year as Piedmont accomplished its most ambitious goal ever. In 1987, the Speedbird won an international route from Charlotte to London, England. Now, back in the 50s, Mr. Davis had joked that Piedmont served London. London, Kentucky, that is. Aboard a new Boeing 767, christened the Pride of Piedmont, the airline flew across the Atlantic Ocean in one last monumental feat.
Most of all, this moment, this historic passage, meant the most to Piedmont's employees. What do you think when that plane took off?
Very excited.
What do you think when it landed?
More excited.
27 years ago, when I started flying DC-3s, I would have never dreamed of flying and working a trip from Charlotte to London in an aircraft that was big enough to put our DC-3 inside of.
As significant as the London route was, it could not save the airline. On August 4th, 1989, the last flight bearing the Speedbird took passengers to their destination. The next day, no trace of Piedmont remained. Every plane, every uniform, every sign on display bore the mark of U.S. Air. Sadness, regret, and thoughts of what might have been permeated the Piedmont family as their company simply vanished. But the once small puddle-jumping airline that had flown to the top of its industry set a unique standard of what could be accomplished if individuals came together to reach higher, work harder, care more. Decades after its demise, the Speedbird retains an almost mythical reputation for quality and service among former employees, passengers, and observers who all remember Piedmont Airlines as a model of how good an airline can be.
Learn more by investigating these resources. Piedmont Airlines, A Complete History, written by Richard Eller. Flight of the Pacemaker by Frank Elliott, a publication of the Piedmont Aviation Historical Society, who also hosts the website jetpiedmont.com. Exhibits and aircraft from the era of Piedmont Airlines are on display at the North Carolina Transportation Museum in Spencer, North Carolina, and the Carolinas Aviation Museum in Charlotte.
12 transmitters, including our new full-power service, providing Canton, Waynesville, and surrounding areas with quality public television. You're watching life-changing television for all of North Carolina. Member-supported UNC TV.
Going to be without food.
Well, if we hadn't made such a fuss about having waitress service, we could have queued up, got it, and eaten it by now.
When you're on your feet all day, the least you can expect is to sit down and rest at lunchtime and have your food served to you like civilized people.
My stomach is bubbling like an atomic power station.
Well, from where I'm sitting, there's a lot of fallout.
We've only got half an hour left to have our dinner.
Lunch.
What's the difference?
What do you have in the evening?
Supper.
Only the working class have dinner and supper. Professional people like ourselves have lunch and dinner.
Now, look, I'm not working class. I live in a detached house.
Captain Peacock, I live in a flat, but that doesn't go to say that I don't lead a very refined life. And in my little nest, we have supper.
Well, Captain Peacock wears a dinner jacket, you know. Lady Peacock sails down the stairs in her tiara. Fancy a sherry before we have the baked beans on toast, he said. No, I think I'll wait and have mine with the cocoa.
Don't be facetious, Mr. Lucas.
Right, I've had a word with that canteen manageress. I put on my best smile. I said, is there any chance of my spaghetti arriving during the reign of the current monarch? We're right here, fool.
I hope she didn't use bad language.
She didn't use any language at all. She just gave me a right here, fool.
Oh, it's intolerable. It's only half an hour before we have to go back.
You know, the whole country's falling apart. When I was a boy, you looked at an atlas. There was red everywhere. That was the British Empire.
Well, it's still red everywhere. Only now it means we owe money there.
I mean, look at these. Plastic. When I first came here, we had tablecloths and real EPNS. I mean, look at that.
Yeah, that's modern science for you.
These scientists are making terrible mistakes. I read somewhere where they've developed a very large clover for animals to eat. Now they find out that they're so big the bees can't pollinate them because their noses aren't long enough.
What are they going to do?
They're going to breed bees with longer noses.
I didn't know they did it with their noses.
You want to watch Richard Attenborough?
Does he do it with his nose?
No, he's the one that runs about in shorts, telling you how the world began. Apparently it all started as thick soup with little orgasms crawling round.
Organisms.
Oh, well, little creepy things crawling in it.
In that case, when I was in the kitchen just now, it's all starting all over again.
You know, it's amazing to think that out of all that soup came all the flowers and plants and animals, and after millions of years, a sort of man developed.
Yeah, and all of them are different types.
Yes, indeed. Some of them live in detached houses and some of them in semi-detached.
Well, as a superior detached individual, would you like to go and have a word about our grub?
Well, that won't be necessary. There's a far simpler way to get in touch with those whose evolution is not advanced enough to enable them to communicate on an intellectual level.
What's that, Captain Peacock?
One we used to use in the army. Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting?
Why are we waiting? Oh, come let us oh, come let us adore.
So, you're the ringleader, are you?
Me, the ringleader? Never on your life, darling. I was just expressing a concerted opinion.
Does one of you wish to complain, then?
We all do.
Right, what's it all about? Let's have it.
We have been sitting here for half an hour and nothing's arrived. Except you.
Right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out there in the kitchen and I'm going to tell everyone to make yours a special order.
Oh, thank you.
Last! One more word, you won't get anything at all.
In that case, we shall complain to higher authority.
I couldn't give a monkey's who you complain to. As far as I'm concerned, you can come down here and run it yourself.
If you don't mind my saying so, they couldn't make a bigger cock-up of it.
It's all very well for you sitting out here like a wrinkled old prune. I'm too short in there and I've got a poison finger.
Cancel my toad in the hole.
I take great exception to you calling a senior salesman like Mr. Goldberg a wrinkled prune. Your whole manner is offensive, your appearance is unhygienic, and your emotional outburst